Dr Cam Calder.
Mr Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to rise and speak in the address and reply debate. It is an enormous privilege to stand in this House, and it's one that I have never got to take for granted. I am honoured to be back for a second term, and as I look at the gallery ahead, above me here, I see the many, many men and women, part of that vast army of National Party supporters who made it possible for this John Key-led national government to have a second term in power. Thank you. It is a huge pleasure to greet the new members of Parliament in the national team. They've added breadth, experience, character and staunchness to an already staunch and broad and characterful lineup. I look forward to working with them in the term ahead. There's been some excellent speeches from across the House.
This isn't one of them.
Wait, there's more. Thank you, Chippy. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. There's been some excellent speeches across the House from all members of all parties, and I'm looking forward to working across collegially with members of all parties and select committees to make this country a better place. Because what people may not know is that 75% of legislation, there is broad bipartisan support. So what you see in question time isn't always what you get. There is a lot of cooperation, and it has to be like that. There is an ancient Chinese curse, ladies and gentlemen, may you live in interesting times. And let's face it, these are interesting times. And I'm thinking particularly of the global financial crisis that we are still in. Despite what the then Leader of the Opposition said in the House almost 12 months ago that it was over, it's not. We know there are huge problems facing us. Sure, the news from the United States of America is slightly improving, and the housing indices, home loan indices and unemployment indices are all reasonably positive. But that is still a work in progress. But we look at Europe. And what do we see? Europe, the European Central Bank in December underwrite 20 billion euros a week the sovereign bond purchases on the secondary markets to support the struggling Eurozone governments. The Eurozone governments are lurching towards default because of the huge debt. They've got an almost unlimited amount of the low-interest, long-term liquidity loans to European banks, and, as I say, almost unlimited volumes, because these are the major purchases of the government debt. So they've got about 430 million euros for them, and let that out on the first day. There is more to come. So then we think about Greece. Now, 230 billion euro to bail out Greece, but the Council of Ministers, or the gathering of ministers in Brussels, have yet to sign that off, because despite the gritted teeth acceptance of the bailout plan by the MPs, they haven't been able to get the coalition leaders to agree. So there is no more pressing need for the fiscal responsibility and prudence in New Zealand of a John Key-led government than we have now. Because, as I've said, we live in uncertain times. We live in uncertain times, and as a result, it is pleasing to see, and it is appropriate to see, and it is absolutely meet and right to see that fiscal prudence will be an ongoing plank in our 3-year term that lies ahead of us. Prudent financial management, getting more from our public services, and rebuilding Christchurch are 3 of the main planks. And of course, improving our trade. Underpinning much of what we wish to achieve, and the 4th pillar, is developing an economy that is more competitive, that is more productive, and that can sell their goods into a wider market. And this is what we have achieved under the good work of, it has to be said, there's some very good work by the previous Finance Minister, Dr. Phil Goff, in negotiating an agreement with China, carried on globally by the Honourable Tim Grosser, who's doing an outstanding job in developing, broadening and deepening our links in global trade. Our goal, we made no secret of it, our goal is to lift our export sector from 30% to 40% of gross domestic product. We are aware that under the previous government, the tradable sector languished from 2004 right through to 2008. Indeed, we entered recession well before the rest of the world, and part of that was that we were not competitive. The decline in competitiveness has started to turn around over the last 3 years, and we are determined to continue this improvement. I'm getting a word from the Whip that we have some maiden speeches, and you didn't come here to listen to me, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Order. During this address and reply debate,